My name is Lin Yuan. I am 27 years old, living in the lower town district in 2457 of the Lin Yuan, a place where all the sun is blocked by data. The sky here is always gray, as if it had been treated with a poor filter. The people on the street lowered their heads, their eyes were empty, as if they had their souls pulled away. The ruling level says this is peace, saying we live in the best times, but I knew since I was a kid that it was all ghosts. They spend time with the police, not only now, but also locked by them in the past. Who dares to say more may disappear from history the next day, and your best friend will not remember that you have existed. I am not a hero, and I have never thought of changing the world. I was just an underground guest, stealing virtual currency by breaking the data barriers of the sanction level. To put it bluntly, it is a cockroach that talks about life and the gaps in the system. But that night, everything changed. That day I was in my broken hut, and in front of me were 3 old projection screens, and the keyboard was crackling. I was trying to invade a database called Lin Yuan file and heard that there was a secret hidden in the statutory level, and I could change a lot of money if I sold it. My fingers were dancing on the virtual interface, and I tore it apart from the firewall. I felt very proud and felt that I was a genius. As a result, just as I was about to touch the core data, the screen suddenly flashed, and the lights in the entire room were burned. What the hell? I lowered my voice, thinking that the downtown area had stopped again. But the next second, my projection screen lit up by itself. It was not a familiar stream of data, but a strange blue light, as if something was flowing behind the screen. I was stunned for a moment. Before my hands could touch the keyboard, a low sound suddenly came out of the screen, and then the entire room seemed to be torn open by something, and a harsh buzzing sound came from the air. My heart beat faster and there was only one thought in my brain: time the police found me. They have something called time and space eraser that can directly remove people from history, and even your mother will not remember having you. I instinctively wanted to run, but as soon as my legs opened, the air in the center of the room suddenly twisted, like a cracked lens, with a dark blue light shining from the crack, covering my entire body. I couldn't move, as if I was being held back by some invisible force. The light became brighter and brighter, making my eyes stumble, and my brain was filled with miscellaneous pictures, some places I didn't know, some people I've never seen, and my father's face. They looked at me with a smile, but the next second, their figures seemed to be erased off by an eraser and disappeared without a trace. My heart was tight and I wanted to shout it out, but my throat seemed to be blocked and I couldn't make any sound. I don't know how long it took, but the light finally darkened. I was on the ground, and I was sweating all over. The room returned to its original appearance, the projection screen was still black, and the cold coffee beside the keyboard was still emitting a faint heat, as if nothing had happened. But I know that just now is definitely not an illusion. I got up and touched the screen with my hands trembling. As a result, the screen lit up and a paragraph of text popped up, as if someone wrote it to me directly. Lin Yuan, you've touched the time crack. The truth is waiting, but the price is death. Choose. I stared at that passage and my brain was blank. Time crack? What kind of ghost thing is that? The ruling level has never mentioned this kind of thing, and has never heard of rumors in the underground market. But the 2 words truth in that passage made me feel like I was being pulled hard by something. I have never let go of the investigation of my father's misunderstanding. They suddenly disappeared 5 years ago. The neighborhood said that they had never existed, and even my old photos turned into blank. But I know that they are real. I remember their smiles. My dad taught me to repair my old computer, and my mother cooked a very bad meal. I gritted my teeth, slammed my fingers on the keyboard, hesitated for about 10 seconds, and then knocked on acceptance. No matter what kind of crack or trap he is, I have to know the truth, even if I have to pay this life. The screen flashed for a moment, and then a string of coordinates popped up. The location was in the scrap industrial area of the lower town district, and the time was 3 a.m. tonight. There is another sentence below: don't be followed, otherwise you will regret it. I turned off the screen, and my heartbeat was still as fast as if it was about to explode. The industrial area has long been deserted and even wandering in the streets. The police's monitoring detectives are everywhere. I know this is not simple, but there is no way out. I dragged out an old backpack from under the bed, stuffed some tools and a stick, put on the torn coat, put on the hat, and left the door with my head down. The nights in the lower town are so cold, with only a few broken road lights on the streets, and the air is full of iron and garbage. I walked along the alley, deliberately avoiding the supervision on the main road, and kept thinking about the words in my brain. Time cracks, truth, death. These words turned around like a knife in my brain, making me both scared and excited. When we arrived at the industrial area, we saw a broken factory, which was pitch black like a monster with its mouth open. The coordinates point to a building at the deepest point, with a sign of raw bamboo hanging at the door, writing bailing time and space experiment station. My heart skipped a beat. Is the time and space experiment station? Isn't this a taboo issue in the statutory level? It was said that a few decades ago, this place was the origin of the time police. Later, it was blocked due to an accident in a certain area and could not even be mentioned. I swallowed and pushed open the iron door that was about to fall apart, so dark that I couldn't see my 5 fingers. I took out a small handphone from my backpack, followed the path down my feet, and walked forward carefully. The factory is full of broken machines and scattered data lines, and a burnt smell is everywhere in the air, making people feel angry. After about 10 minutes of leaving, I finally saw the coordinates, a huge circular device, like some kind of delivery door, with a blue light remaining in the middle, exactly like the crack I saw in my room. I stood in front of the device, my legs were a little soft, but I still walked over with my head. Just as I reached out to touch the blue light, a sneer suddenly came from behind me. "Lin Jing, you really dare to come?" I turned around suddenly, and the light of the hand shone on a woman in a black uniform. She was about 30 years old, with short hair, and her eyes were as sharp as if she could pierce me directly. There was a time police badge on her left arm, but there was a clear plot on the badge, as if it had been intentionally scraped off. "Who are you?" I held the electric stick tightly, and the sound was a little shaking, but I still put on a look of not being afraid. She snorted coldly and walked over, her steps as stable as a knight. "My name is Alice, a defector. I used to be the time police, but now, forget it, you don't need to know that much. I just want to tell you that what you just touched is the biggest secret of the time cracker, the sectarian level." My brain buzzed, and the words time crack were spoken from her mouth, which felt more realistic than the words on the screen. "How do you know my name? Also, why are you following me?" Ellie didn't answer directly, but took out a small metal device from her pocket, filled with strange symbols. "Because I've been looking for people like you, people who are not afraid of death and dare to challenge time locks. This is a time decoder that can help you enter the crack, but it will also allow the time police to lock your position immediately. Do you dare to catch it?" I looked at the metal device, and the balance in my heart was shaking wildly. One side is the truth, maybe the whereabouts of my father, the other side is the time police eraser, maybe I will disappear from this world in the next second. But I have already reached this point, is there still a way out? Give it to me. I gritted my teeth and reached out to take the device. A smile appeared on the corner of Ellie's lips, as if she had expected that I would choose this way. "Don't regret it." After she finished speaking, she turned around and walked to the circular device and pressed a hidden button. The blue light burst into pieces in an instant, illuminating the entire factory like during the day. I felt a strong suction force, as if someone was pulling me into the crack, and my brain began to flash those strange scenes: war, flames, and screams from countless people. "What is this?" I shouted, all the sounds being swept by the buzzing sound. Ellie looked back at me, with a complex look in her eyes that could not be described. "This is a history that has not been tampered with, and the ruling level does not allow you to see. Lin Yu, are you ready? Once you go in, you will never come back." I didn't have time to answer, and the whole person was swallowed by the blue light. My body seemed to be torn into pieces and put together again, and my mind was blurred as if I was dreaming. But I knew very well that this was not a dream, and this was the first time I really resisted this dead eternal primordial. What is the other side of the crack? I don't know. But I know that from this moment on, I am no longer the little guest who will only hide underground and steal data. I am Lin Yuan. I want to find the truth, even if it is bound to the whole world. The blue light dissipated, and I felt like I stepped onto the ground under my feet, but the air around me was as cold as ice, and I could still hear a deep sound of horns around my ears. I opened my eyes and found myself standing in a ruin. The sky was red with blood, and there were explosions of fire and guns everywhere. This is not a downtown area, nor is it anywhere I know. Where is this? I turned around and asked Alice. She stood beside me, her face was more solemn than she had just done. This is an erased war scene in 2247 AD. Her voice was so low that she could hardly hear. The ruling level does not want anyone to know this history because it is the starting point of their rise. Lin Yuan, every scene you see is a fragment of the truth. I hadn't had time to digest her words yet, and suddenly there was a rapid sound of footsteps from afar, accompanied by mechanical thorns. Ellie suddenly grabbed me and said in a low voice, "Time police tracker has locked us, hide it." My heart beat fast as if it was about to explode, and I followed her to hide behind a pile of wastelands. Through the gap, I saw several figures wearing heavy armor walking towards this side, holding a device with a flash of red light in my hand, like a weapon that can directly evaporate people. Their helmets were engraved with the Time Policeman's logo, and the one who took off his helmet showed a very cold face, and his eyes swept around like a knife. "Inspector Carlos." Ellie gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, "He is here, we are in a state of urgency." I don't know who Carlos is, but I can feel that this guy is definitely not easy to mess with. The air in the ruins became more and more tight. I held the electric rod in my hand tightly, and there was only one thought in my heart: no matter what, I had to live to the day when I found the truth. I squatted behind the pile of waste irons, my heart beat so fast that it was about to pop out of my chest, and the electric rod in my hand was a little slippery with sweat. Ellie leaned beside me, her face blue and her eyes fixed on the movements of the police at those times. The guy named Carlos stood in the middle of the ruins, holding his helmet in his hand, and every line on his face was filled with a cold killing. His voice was as low as it was coming from the earth, carrying an unquestionable threat. "Ellie, I know you're here." His voice spread through the loudspeaker beside his helmet, shaking my ears buzzing. "You think Defector can escape from the palm of my hand? And that little guest, Lin Jing, right? Your existence is already a mistake. Don't force me to erase you from history alone." I heard my name coming from his mouth, and I felt aroused, as if I was being icy water from my head to my feet. Ellie replied in a low voice, then turned to look at me, with an indescribable anxious look in her eyes. "Don't listen to him, he's forcing us to appear. Although the Time Police tracker can lock the approximate position of the crack, it can't accurately identify individuals. As long as we don't move, they can't find us. But how long can we hide?" I lowered my voice, my throat drying as if I was about to smoke. "There are all ruins here, and there are no hiding places like this. What about all things they use to detect with heat?" Ellie bit her lip, as if she was hesitating for a moment, then took out the metal device engraved with symbols from her pocket, which is what she said was the time decoder. She said in a low voice, "This can interfere with their tracking signals for a short time, but the agency will reveal our approximate direction. We have to take a chance and run out and find the next crack exit." I clicked the head, and although I was still panicked, I also knew that there was no other choice now. Ellie pressed a button on the decoder, and the device emitted a low bird, and there seemed to be invisible waves in the air. The policeman suddenly stopped walking at a distance, and Carlos turned suddenly, his eyes narrowed, as if he had noticed something. "Sign interference? Alice, you really don't give up." He sneered and signaled his subordinates to scatter. "Search it for me. Don't let go of every inch of the ruins. Run." Alice growled, pulled me out from behind the pile of waste irons. We tilted our waists, relaxed our feet as lightly as possible, and ran towards a broken building deep in the ruins. I could even feel the heat of their red weapons swept through the air when the police shouted and the snatched in the mechanical armor. We ran into a half-collapsed building, full of cracked steel tendons and gravel, and the air was filled with heavy smell of soil. Ellie gasped while breaking the wall. Her face was covered in sweat, but her eyes were still as sharp as a knife. This place was the war in 2247, and that year was the last point of the rebel army. The sectarian level erased this history, but the cracks retained the real shadow. We had to use the terrain to delay time and find the exit. I clicked my head, and my brain was still digesting what she was saying. Resist the army, fight against each other. These things sound like the love story in an old movie, but now they are really in front of me. I wiped the sweat from my face and asked her, "Where's that exit? We can't always run, right?" Ellie shook her head. Her fingers quickly operated on the decoder, and a small light curtain was projected on the surface of the device, showing a series of jumps. The exit is random, the time cracking is unstable, and the location is different every time. I'm trying to calculate the next possible date, but it takes time. Time? How can we have time? I couldn't help but yelled in a low voice. The policeman's steps were getting closer and closer at those times outside, as if he could come in and tear us apart at any time. She glared at me, as if she thought I was quarrel, but she said patiently, "I heard, Lin Qing, if you want to know the truth, you have to learn to be calm. Carlos is not an ordinary person, he is the highest inspector of the time police, specializing in cleaning up the opath like us. He won't let us go easily, but we don't have the opportunity either. As long as we find the crack exit, we can jump to another time and throw them away." I gritted my teeth and pointed it, and although it was still a mess in my heart, I also knew she was right. At this moment, a huge sound suddenly came from outside, as if something was blown up, followed by Carlos's voice, as cold as ice, "Ellie, your handbag has ended here. I can consider making you die happily after handing over that guest." Ellie's face became even more difficult to see. She whispered and pulled me to Diamond from the other side of the broken wall. We walked around the ruins, with gravel and metal slaughter under our feet, and almost fell down a few times. The explosion and shouting behind me were getting closer and closer, and I could even hear the low birds when the police's weapons were charged at those times, like death sharpening the knife. Finally, after traversing a pile of collapsed mechanical slaughter, Ellie stopped and pointed to a small blue light in front of her and said, "It's there. The crack exit, hurry." I looked in the direction she pointed, and sure enough, I saw a group of blue lights spiraling in the air, like a small vortex, emitting a strange attraction. We didn't have time to hesitate and rushed straight towards the blue light. But just as we were about to touch it, a sharp sound of air braking sound suddenly came from behind, as if something was shooting at high speed. "Be careful." Ellie pushed me suddenly, and I fell to the ground. A red light wiped over the top of my head, hitting the dead bones next to me, instantly turning the pile of metal into a rock. I turned around and saw Carlos chasing him with several subordinates. He was holding a long weapon with red light in his hand, and a mocking smile on his face. "Running very fast, little guy." He walked over slowly, his voice full of cats catching mice. "But the game ends here. Alice, you should know that time cracks are not something you can control. If you hand it over, I might give you more minutes." Ellie gritted her teeth, stood up and pressed in front of me, holding the decoder tightly in her hand. "Carlos, do you think I'll believe your ghost? I haven't forgotten how you treated the defectors back then." Carlos's face darkened, and there was a flash of murder in his eyes. "Don't blame me." He waved his hand and the police at the same time raised their weapons. The red light gathered in the air, as if it could burn us to ashes at any time. My heart was tightened, and my brain was flying quickly, trying to find a way out. But this place is not connected to the village or the shop behind it. The only direction I can run is the blue light whirlpool, but it is still more than 10 meters away from us, which is not as good as it can be. Just then, Ellie suddenly said to me in a low voice, "Lin Jing, please hear it well, I will hold them back, you rush over and jump into the crack. I have set the decoder and will automatically take you to the next safety point. Remember, don't turn around." "What? You're crazy." I widened my eyes, my voice changing. "How can you hold them alone?" "No, I have to go together." She ignored me and just said coldly, "Don't waste, do you think I'll die in vain?" I'm the policeman before, I have my choice. Go quickly, otherwise we all will die. I was still trying to say something, but she had already pushed me hard, then turned toward Carlos and the others, and the decoder in her hand made a harsh high noise, as if it was interfering with their weapon system. The police's actions at those times were clearly revealed, and Carlos summoned and raised his weapon to shoot at Ellie. I gritted my teeth and took advantage of this short chaotic situation, got up and rushed towards the blue light vortex. The explosion and shouting behind me almost made my ears shake, but I didn't dare to turn my head back. There was only one thought in my heart: live and find the truth. Finally, I plunged into the blue light. My body seemed to be torn into pieces and then crushed again, and my brain was covered with miscellaneous pictures: war, flames, and the last look of Ellie's eyes was full of determination. When the blue light faded, I found myself standing in a completely unfamiliar place. This place is no longer a ruin, but a deserted desert. The sun is as poisonous as it can cook people. There are only a few broken buildings far away, as if they have been abandoned for hundreds of years. There was a burnt smell in the air, making people feel angry. I looked down and held the decoder that Ellie had given me, which showed a new string of coordinates in a passage. The next crack: find the old man, and he will tell you the secret of the time core. Be careful, the time police will chase you at any time. Old man? The core of time. These terms are still a joke to me, but I know that this is the thread of Ellie's life changing, and I can't waste it. I gasped for a few breaths, wiped off the sweat from my face, and walked towards the direction shown by the coordinates. The road in the desert was extremely difficult to walk, the sand was burning like fire, and the feet were so painful that they thrust. I left for about 2 hours, my throat was as dry as if I was about to smoke. Finally, I saw the location: a building half buried in the sand. A broken sign was hanging at the door, writing Time and Space Research Station Bale. I opened the door and it was pitch black inside, with only a few lights that were damaged by the broken lights. The air was full of scent and earthy smell, and there were some strange and unspeakable breaths, as if time had been ruined here. I walked forward carefully, and the flashlight swept around me, and found that the place was full of old equipment and scattered data, as if it was abandoned a few decades ago. Just as I was about to go deeper, a deep cough suddenly came from the corner, which scared me to throw away my handicap. I turned around and looked over, and saw a skinny old man sitting on a broken chair, full of facial patterns, and his eyes were as bright as if he could see through people. He stood up slowly in a torn experiment, holding something like a crutch in his hand. "You're Lin Jing, aren't you?" His voice was as silly as an old-fashioned radio, but there was a decisive determination in his language. "Allie's head is really not a mistake. You can come here to show that you have some skills." I was stunned for a moment, my brain had not reacted yet. Are you old?" He slighted his head, grinned, revealing some yellow teeth. "Yes, I am the old man, one of the founders of the policemen back then. Now I am just a bad old man hiding in the desert waiting to die. You come to me, should it be for the core of time, right?" I clicked the head and felt excited, but I couldn't help asking, "How do you know my name? Also, what is the core of time?" The old man didn't answer directly, but just waved his hand to signal me to sit down. Then he turned out a bottle of water from the broken table next to him that he had been left for unknown amount of time and sent it to me. "Drink a little water first and listen to me slowly. The core of time is the lifeblood of the sanitary level and the key device for time police to lock history. It is hidden in the deepest time cracks, and only a few people know how to find it. Alice lets you come to me because I have a map of it in my hand." I took the water. Although the taste was so weird, I still gulped a few times and asked, "Where is that map? We have to move quickly, and the police will chase you at any time." The old man shook his head, and there was a cumbersome look in his eyes. "The map is not a real thing, but a code engraved in my brain. But to get it, you have to prove that you are qualified first. The core of time is not something that anyone can touch, otherwise it will only bring greater disaster." As soon as I heard this, my heart became angry and couldn't help but stand up and say, "Certify qualifications? Old man, I almost died at the hands of the police at the time, and Ellie was dragging them behind me. Do you tell me about qualifications? We don't have time to play this game. Lao Wu was not anxious or impatient, but just looked at me quietly, with a deep meaning in his eyes that could not be expressed. Young people can't solve the problem. Once the core of time falls into the hands of the wrong person, the entire history will collapse. By then, not only the eternal zodiac, but also the past and the future will become a group of chaotic. I can understand that you want to overthrow the ruling level, but you have to prove first that you have the ability to assume this responsibility. I gritted my teeth, although I was still very excited, but I also knew that he had made sense. I sat down again and asked with a fire, "How do you tell me?" The old pointer stood up, flipped out an old projection device from the broken cabinet next to it, pressed the switch to project the light curtain, which shows a series of complex data and maps. The first step is that you have to go through my test, enter a specific time crack, and get the time fragment inside. That thing is one of the keys of the core of time and an experience of your ability. If you can do it, I'll give you the map. I looked at the map on the light curtain and felt a little nervous. Trying time fragments. These are not simple to hear, but I also know that this is the only way at present. I clicked, clenched my fists and said, "Okay, I'll take on this task. Tell me, where's the crack?" The old man grinned, as if he had expected that I would agree. He pointed to a red spot on the light curtain and said, "It's deep in this desert, about a day away. Remember, the things in the cracks are not just danger, but also challenging your will. Don't let me down, boy." I clicked the head and took a small backpack he came with some basic supplements and tools in it. The night wind in the desert came in from the broken window, which was biting cold, but a fire ignited in my heart. No matter what, I have to get that time fragment, not only for myself, but also for Ellie, for those who have been erased by the ruling level. I turned around and walked out of the broken research station, and the starry sky in the desert spread out above me, as if countless eyes were looking at me. I took a deep breath and took the first step towards the red point on the map. Behind him, the old man's voice came in a low voice, as if he was talking to himself. "I hope this kid can really withstand it." I didn't look back, but just quietly accelerated my pace. The road in the desert is still very long, and the police may come at any time, but I know that I must continue this road. The night wind in the desert was shattered like a knife, piercing my face and hurting, but I didn't stop, holding the map projector given by the old man in my hand, staring at the red spot above. Under the starry sky, the sand dunes are like waves of static waves, and are endless, making people feel as small as a grain of dust. I left for about half a night. My legs were sore as if I had been filled with a penis, but the fire in my heart was still burning, forcing me to move forward step by step. When the sky was just gray, I finally saw the location on the map, a huge piece of sandstone, as if it was being slashed by something, and a thread broke out in the middle, with familiar blue light hidden inside. Time cracker, this ghost thing again. I swallowed. My throat was as dry as sand, but I still walked over with my head hard. The air around the crack is twisting, scattering a low-frequency buzz, as if it can directly diamond into the brain, making people feel excited. I took a deep breath, took out the decoder that Ellie had left for me from my backpack, and pressed the start button. The device emitted a slight vibration, and the blue light seemed to be driven by something, expanding into a whirlpool. I didn't think much about it, so I just plunged in. The feeling of being torn into pieces and then being slapped back again, and there were a bunch of chaotic scenes in my brain, with wars, ruins, and some people I don't know screaming. I gritted my teeth and told myself that this was just a side effect of cracks, and I just need to be wiped out. When the consciousness finally settled down, I found myself standing in a completely unfamiliar place. This is not a desert or a ruin, but a place that looks like a laboratory, surrounded by cold metal walls, with several white lights on the top of the head, and the air is filled with the smell of disinfectant. There were some broken data disks and burnt circuit boards scattered on the ground, as if they had just experienced an explosion. I felt tightening in my heart, holding the electric rod in my hand, and walking forward carefully. I haven't found out where the time fragments mentioned by Lao Jian are, but I just told me that this place is definitely not simple. I walked through several collapsed equipment racks and came to the center of the experiment room. I saw a huge transparent container with a small piece of glowing crystal floating inside, emitting a dark blue light, exactly the same as the color of the time crack. My heart beat faster and a thought popped up in my brain: this should be a fragment of time. But just as I was about to get closer, a low bird suddenly sounded like a wall next to me, and then a piece of metal board slid open, revealing a figure wearing a black uniform. Inspector Carlos. I can't forget that cold face. He held the weapon with red light in his hand, and a mocking smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, as if he had been waiting for me for a long time. Lin Jing, you really don't know how to live or die. His voice was as low as he could hold on to the air. I thought I could throw me away by hiding the crack. Time police tracking skills are not that easy to fool. I took a step back, feeling panicked, but I still held my face tightly, clamped the electric stick and said, Carlos, how did you find me? Where is Ellie? How did she do? He sneered and walked slowly. Every step seemed to be knocking on my heart. Ellie? She's still alive, for a while. But she's trapped in a circle now and can never escape. As for you, don't expect to go far. I can let you die happily with the decoder. I gritted my teeth and my brain flew quickly. Alice is still alive, and that's the only good news, but I know that the guy Carlos will never let me go. The time fragments were just a few meters away, but he was in the middle, so I didn't have the chance to get close. I said in a low voice, do you want a decoder? Okay, come and get it. Speaking, I pretended to throw the decoder over, but my hand shook and deliberately let it fall to the ground and rolled to Carlos' foot. He glanced at the brow, his eyes flashed with disdain. At the moment when he lowered his head and slammed it hard, I rushed over and smashed the electric rod hard at the back of him. But he reacted so quickly that he hid from the side for a moment, then kicked me in the chest, kicking me all over, and hitting the equipment stand next to him. That's all? He snorted coldly, lifted up the decoder, and put it in his pocket. Lin Jing, you are just a little cockroach, don't think you can make any waves. I covered my chest, so painful that I couldn't breathe, but my eyes were still staring at the transparent container. Time fragments are my only hope, and I can't just give up. I gritted my teeth, got up, pretending to run, and actually rolled towards the container. Carlos seemed to have expected it, and he raised his weapon. A red light brushed my shoulders and burned a big hole in the wall next to him. When it's a little longer, it's not a wall next time. His voice was as cold as ice, but I ignored him and tried my best to hit the container, slapped his palm on the control panel on it. The container emits a low sound, the transparent cover opens quietly, and the blue crystals float in the air, emitting a strange wave. I reached out to grab it, but just as my fingers were about to touch the crystal, Carlos suddenly appeared behind me, grabbed my wrist with great force as if he wanted to crush the bones. You are really not afraid of death? He growled, and his other hand raised his weapon, pointing directly at my brain. My heart was over, it was over, there was no way out this time. But at this moment, a huge sound suddenly came from the other end of the experiment room, as if something was blown up, followed by a hurrying sound and shouting. I turned around and saw that the Red Yen came in with a few people wearing ragged clothes, holding a self-made electromagnetic gun in his hand and shooting at Carlos. Lin Jing, take the fragments quickly. Red Yen roared, full of eagerness. Although his gun could not directly damage Carlos, the electromagnetic interference interfered with his weapon system, and the red light could not fire for a while. Carlos summoned me, loosened me, turned around and rushed towards Red Flame and the others. I didn't waste this opportunity, so I grabbed the time fragments, stuffed them into my backpack, and ran towards the exit of the other end of the laboratory. Behind me was the exchange of fire between Red Flame and Carlos, and the explosion and shouting mixed together, which made my ears buzz. I felt so guilty in my heart, but I also knew that stopping now would only make them die in vain. I pulled out of the laboratory. Outside there was a long corridor, and as long as I could, there was a blue vortex of cracked blue light. I gritted my teeth and jumped in. My body felt another tearing pain, and my mind was as blurred as if I was dreaming. When I was sniffing again, I realized that I had returned to the broken research station of Lousy. The heat from the desert poured in from the window, shaving my face full of sand. The old man was still sitting on the broken chair. When he saw me, his eyes lit up and he grinned. "No, boy, you really got it." "Let me see." I gasped and took out time fragments from my backpack and handed them over to him. He took it over and carefully looked at it, saying, "That's it, one of the keys of the core of time. With it, we're one step closer to destroying the police's control system." I wiped my sweat and asked him, "What's next? Where's the core of time? Also, what should Ellie and Red Flame do?" "Carlos won't let them go." The old man sighed and had a complicated look in his eyes. "The core of time is hidden in the deepest crack, a place called the 0-point crack. It is the exchange of all timelines and the core secret of the ruling level. As for Alice and Red Flame, I would like to contact other rebels and save them as much as possible. But you have to understand that revolution is not a matter of saving one person or two, and it is difficult to escape." I gritted my teeth, and my heart seemed to be blocked by something, which was hard to bear, but I knew he was right. I clicked the head and asked, "How to get the 0-point crack?" "We have to hurry up, Carlos will come after you any time." Lao Jian stood up, flipped out an old data disk from the broken table and inserted it into the projector. A complex map is displayed on the light curtain, marking a red point, and the words 0 scratch final point are written next to it. He said in a low voice, "This is the map in my brain, which is now for you. The 0-point crack is unstable, and the risk of entry is extremely high, and it may even make you lose in the timeline and never come back." I looked at the red spot and felt a little nervous, but I still gritted my teeth and said, "I don't have to choose. There is no way out since I stepped into the first crack. Tell me how to go, I will get it all." The old man is slightly lit up, and there is a little more appreciation in his eyes. He pointed to the path on the map and said, "This road will pass through several small cracks. Each crack is an examination, but it is also a necessary path to 0. Remember, the core of time is not only a device, but also a focal point of time. Destroying it will cause all locked historical lines to collapse and bring unknown confusion. You have to be mentally prepared." I clicked the head, took the data plate, and stuffed it into my backpack. In the next few days, I followed the path on the map and passed through time cracks one after another. Each crack was like a nightmare, some of which drove me into the sea of war, some let me see the erased historical shadows, and even once, I was almost trapped in an infinite cycle of time, almost forgot who I was. But I gritted my teeth and rushed over because I knew that this was the only thing I could do. Finally, after passing through the last crack, I arrived at the entrance of the 0 crack. There's not blue light like other places here, but a pure darkness, like a black hole that can swallow everything, and there's a sense of pressure in the air, making people breathless. I stood in front of the entrance, my palms were covered in sweat, and my heartbeat was so fast that it was about to explode. I took out the time fragments from my backpack and embed them into the decoder as taught by the old method. The device emitted a low bird, and a thread broke open in the darkness, revealing a twisted light, as if countless times were colliding. I took a deep breath and walked in. There is complete chaos inside, without up, down, left and right, and the flow of time cannot be felt. My mind is like being pulled by something, and countless pictures are flashed in my brain. The past, now, and in the future, are all mixed together, making it impossible to tell the difference between true and false. In the center, a huge ray of light-emitting sphere floats, emitting dazzling white light, and countless light lines are surrounded, like a network of time. This is the core of time, the fate of the sanitary level. I approached it, holding the decoder in my hand, and prepared to press the destroyer. But at this moment, a familiar voice came from behind, as cold as a knife. "Lin Jing, you have really come to this point." I turned around suddenly and saw Carlos standing nowhere, with a twisted smile on his face. He was covered in injuries, as if he had just experienced a war, but his eyes were still as if he could pierce people. "You think that destroying the core of time can change everything? Naive. Once the timeline collapses, chaos will swallow everything, but you are accelerating the death of human beings." I gritted my teeth, held the decoder and said, "That's stronger than being locked in the sack by these guys." Carlos, this is all over. He sneered, raised his weapon, and pointed the red light straight into my chest. Let's see, who falls down first? I didn't have the chance to fire him, so I rushed over and smashed the stick hard at his arm. The red light rubbed my skin over, burning the smell of the air. We started to fight in chaos, and each hit seemed to hit the line of time, making the light around us tremble. I know I can't beat him, but he can't fully control the energy here either. Finally, in a fight, I grabbed the gap and pressed the decoder hard on the core of time. The device made a sharp sound, and the white light ball began to vibrate violently, and the light around it seemed to be torn, making a harsh sound. Carlos yelled and tried to stop me, but it was too late. Lin Jing, you will regret it. His voice was drowned in a light. I felt a huge suction force, and my body seemed to be torn open by something, and my mind was blurred in an instant. When I slid my eyes again, I realized that I was lying in a broken alley in the lower city area. The sky was still in the gray color, but there was an unspeakable difference in the air. People on the street no longer walked with their heads down, but gathered together in 3 or 3, discussing something, with a glimmer of light that I was not familiar with in my eyes. I got up, my brain was still in a mess, but I knew in my heart that the core of time had been destroyed and the police's regime collapsed. But this is not the end. I pulled out the decoder from my pocket, which showed a piece of data left behind the time Ellie was trapped. I held the device tightly and a burst of hope ignited in my heart. The new line of history brings unknown chaos, but I know I have to find her, in the red flame, and the people who give everything to this revolution. I took a deep breath and walked towards the seat. There were more and more people on the street, and there was a disturbing atmosphere in the air, but I didn't stop. The price of freedom is chaos, but at least, we finally have the right to choose.